Hello, this is Malorian, and this is going to be my kind of final thoughts and coverage of the Havoc tournament. Alright, so to start off with, something I should talk about because it was a good part of the tournament that wasn't part of any of the other battle reports, and that was the Joust that they had. So what they had is on the second day between the two games is you basically did a joust. You pick some model from your army and everybody gets in, and it really didn't matter what you used. It was just kind of like a marker that you'd put it down on the field. And really what you're doing is you can kind of see the papers here, but there's a list going down, and each of these has a chance that it's actually going to work, a chance where it's actually going to break the lands for a point, and then a chance that it's going to unhorse the opponent. And really, you get 3 runs. Whoever has the most points at the end wins, unless somebody is unhorsed, in which case it's an automatic win. And of course, the farther you go down the list, the better it is. But the thing is that you do it in order from top to bottom. So if somebody picked item number 2 and somebody picked item number 4, item 2 goes first, and they have the first chance to basically unhorse the other person. Uh, Me and my Wolf Rider were unhorsed the very first run, but it was just a fun little thing that they threw in, and it was pretty neat. So at the end of the day, it actually turned out I won a trophy. I actually won Best Sportsman, and this was fantastic to me. I mean, like coming into the last game where it looked like I had a shot at Best General, I kind of lost it, but it was good to know that I had a good, strong showing and was at least up and being a contender. But something I know how to go into a tournament and be a jerk, but something I always wanted to do was to show that I can also be a good, fun gamer and get Best Sportsman. But the problem is that there's so many fun players out there to play against that it never happens. I might get high sportsman scores, but I never get the best. And in this one it was also neat because in this case it was 100%. Every single one of the 6 players that I played against voted me for the best sport. So I mean it meant a lot to me, and this trophy it looks different. I love it, and something that's definitely going to go up there with things like winning best overall at Out of the Basement. Right? It's just one of those things I can be really proud of, and I don't know if I'm ever going to win again because there's just so many fun players out there. Alright, so during this part here where I'm going to be talking about my thoughts of the tournament and my list and things like that, normally I'd be showing pictures of my own, like just the battle reports, that's my favorite pictures, but I actually went through when everybody was displaying for best presentation and took pictures of all the ones that were set up. So now you can see the ones that were here. My very favorite one of all is this one guy did one where it's an ogre army done up to be Smurfs. So they have the white hats all green stuffed on, they're all painted white and blue, they got Papa Smurf there to lead them. It was just, man, I wished I could play that army. So you're going to see that coming up when it finally gets to it. But one of the things I couldn't believe is that one of the most popular, or the most popular army at the tournament was Ogre Kingdoms, and I faced 0 of them. Of course, I always say it that the matchup between orcs and goblins and ogres is just so far in the orc side that, I mean, getting a matchup like that is almost like a pure massacre. But, it's probably better then that it didn't happen, right? All the games that I had were really good. There's really just the one that was kind of the blowout, and even then it was, at least there were some parts to it. Of course, I'm talking about the Lizardman one where the Slan died right away, and then I mean, if it wasn't for him rolling double ones, it was going to be over so much faster. So at least he had that going for him. But, I mean, really, it was a really great tournament. The only thing I could say that wasn't maybe that could be improved for later is that I found that the scenarios were very texty. There was really a whole bunch to it, and I mean you always want to have scenarios that are different and interesting. But it almost seemed like there was too much at times. There's one where even the scenario took 2 pages to go over. And I mean, it was just great to go through it. I mean, of that, only you say like the first paragraph would be fluff, and all the rest are rules. And I mean, when you're going through and it's a long tournament like this, it's a lot to try and read through it all. So something else you could also do is if you were wanting this to happen is to kind of pre-post them before so that people could be ready for them, because you only have so long for a game. But I mean, overall, I found all the missions very fun and interesting and had their very real tactical aspects to it. You were always worried about trying to do the actual scenario and get the extra victory points, but at the same time, you also had to worry about those three other objectives that were actually going to go to your battle points and were critically important. So you always had to balance those things, and so I mean, all of them were a lot of fun. The way it built up to the end, where they actually gave you something at the very end, that was very interesting. Um, and I don't think any of the missions or the fact that that went over was broken or anything like that. I think everything was very well fit and worked very well. Something else, of course, doesn't show up on the battle reports is that the tournament organizer for this one and his wife actually cooked the meals for breakfast, lunch, and all that stuff. And it was just really good food. I mean, normally if you go to a tournament, you might get nothing, or you might get pizza or something, but usually the food quality is fairly low. And at this one here, I mean, it was very high, so it was very nice to see and great to have some. I mean, like we had like this special like pecan caramel. Pancakes and stuff the one morning and all that. It was just fantastic. We had a steak dinner. It was just really good. I don't know on his side. I mean, if I was an organizer, I don't think I'd do that just because maybe I'm a little bit more lazy and I wouldn't want to be stuck in the kitchen the whole time. But I mean, really, it was something that stood out. Something as far as the tables go is that those are real different from what I'm used to in the tournaments in Edmonton. This one here was in Calgary. Was the fact that there was so much terrain on the table that was impassable. Normally, when I'm playing, I mean, whether you're going with the rule book and you're rolling, or what I'm used to seeing is that a lot of the terrain you get normally isn't impassable, and it wasn't a big deal, right? You can just walk through hills and forests and things, and it doesn't really matter. And plus, when you're placing them, they might be off in a corner. Because of two missions having a central base, there was always something that was impassable on all the tables in the very center, and then usually there was, say, 2 to 4 more impassable large buildings somewhere on the board. And what that did was really break things up. And I found it very difficult to try and use that with my hordes. Of course, I need to kind of move them as a line to catch everything. And when I have these impassable things, first of all, in the center, it forces me to split my lines, which is a problem with leadership. And then, of course, when I have two buildings close together, I can only maybe fit one horde through there. So all of a sudden I need to try and work what horde is going to go into the building and try and pop over. And what I really found is that most of the time going through the tournament, I was having to 6 dice Hand of Gork rather than Foot of Gork just because I needed to constantly fix my position. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's just something you need to, or I'll need to keep in mind next time I come here, that that's just the way that it's done at this tournament. It's almost like when you're looking at the meta, something you have to keep in mind. And so definitely when I come back here, I just can't do armies that are based on that and needing to work together, close together, because this forces me to break apart. Another part is that here I saw a lot of more throwaway units than I do usually in Edmonton. Usually in Edmonton, those tournaments, I'm seeing a lot more big hordes, and here it was a lot more smaller units that needed to work off of the redirecting and the directed magic and all this. And again, that's probably because they're used to having all this terrain, and that's the way that their lists adjust. I also have to realize that because that one player, they're also very used to dealing with trolls and using those buildings in order to reduce the effect that hordes can actually have. So, I mean, it's just one of those things you have to keep in mind. Now, coming to my list and kind of working down from top to bottom. Now, my level 4. My level 4, I was disappointed with. First of all, because he kept on getting himself killed in a lot of the games. And, I mean, something I should do is, if he's going to be a frontline character, the Fencer Blades are nice, but I really need something else there to keep him safe. Whether it's going to be a unit champion in order to take away some of these challenges, or if it's going to be something like a better ward. And even though the 5+ ward is nice, this kind of works in with my second complaint, which was, I really missed the scroll. So many times where I was hit with something that was a very powerful magic, where if I just had a scroll, would have very much changed the game. Just think of that one Vampire Counts game where my trolls were destroyed, and I had to basically now keep them out of combat. If I could have just scrolled that Pit of Shades, they would have slammed into the ghouls the next turn. totally different game. So I think going in the future, I just really have to go with that scroll, and I may still go with the savage, right? It might be a savage with the fencer blades and a scroll, but then I might try and go with something else and give him like some other sort of ward or some other defensive gear, or maybe at that point I might just give up and put him in the back. But I mean, then I'm dealing with the animosity that I had last time. So obviously I'm going to have to put more thought into how I'm going to be running that. Second of all was the whole leadership thing. Definitely in an army like this, where I had so many leadership dependent units in it, I really need to have a higher leadership, be it through the leadership banner or having a war boss. And really, the investment you have to put in to make that happen isn't very high, and so I think that's something I really have to look into in the future, because especially if I'm going to run trolls and stuff, I just cannot have a low leadership. Next, going to my savages, I was fairly happy with my savages. I mean, in the one Vampire Count game, they basically saved me with how killy they were, where even where things were falling apart, they kind of saved the day for me, where I thought everything was going to collapse. So, I mean, they're always really great. My Night Goblins, they kind of failed me because of panic tests and things, but that's really because of the low leadership. And again, that's just something of having to deal with it with the actual general. I think the idea of having the fanatics on them was a good idea, especially with trying to kill these redirecting units, but I might want to have to invest the points to either making, if I'm going to be having that character still with them, making it a goblin rather than a night goblin in order so I can have that, or maybe even if it's not going to be the BSB, making it a war boss. And that's something I really took away with the last game with that one goblin player, is that even though he's playing night goblins, because he had war bosses everywhere, his leadership was fairly good. And you know what? A goblin war boss is not a lot of points. We're talking 60 points to get a leadership 8. And I mean, I can take one of those and attach it to my trolls. Now, sure, my opponent can go and try and snipe this guy because it's monstrous infantry compared to just infantry, but I mean, that's taking away from somewhere else. And really, it's just a 60-point investment to make it so that if my general ever dies, I don't really have to care. And or if they charge away from my general, that doesn't really matter. And that was happening all the time, where I had to worry where, sure, my savages might be redirected over here, and I might be able to counter for being flanked and stuff, but then it'd be taking away from the general, or sorry, the trolls on the other side of the board, and I just had to keep everything together. And so I really had to try and figure out ways of getting the better leadership in there. My Wolf Riders, I mean, if I made this list before I made my new Wolf Riders, and so I think with the whole spears and bows, I wouldn't bother. I just go with the shield unit that I have now, but I mean, that's a minor change. Something else I should talk about when I'm talking about core is I really need to have more throwaway units in this list. It's not so much of needing them out there to do the redirecting or anything like that. It's more that when I've had them in the past, I've had real control over the matchups to make sure that all the units I have are matched up with the right ones of my opponents. And I just did not have that, and that really hurt me in a lot of my games here. It was nice to have a low model count, and I mean, because of the +1, out of my 7 games, I went first 6 times, but really, does it really matter if you're going first if you have these bad matchups? So that's something I definitely have to keep in mind. Going on to my specials, I have my Blackworks. I no problem with the Blackworks at all. The only thing that I need to talk about here is the Banner of Swiftness compared to the Banner of Flaming. And you know what? I think that Banner of Swiftness is going to stay. That extra 2 inches when I'm marching was just huge. It helped me get some of the longer charges in. And really, that Flaming Banner a lot of times isn't really needed. You're not seeing the double hydras as much and stuff anymore, and really getting that extra movement is probably a lot more important to me. The Squig Herd, I mean, it didn't really have much time to kind of show its thing, but, you know, it did well enough. Obviously, I was a little bit too aggressive with it in that last game, which got it killed, but, you know, it's still a solid unit. That brings us to the Trolls. And now, I think for sure, one spot where I'd never take a horde of Trolls again is in 1800. It's just too small, I don't have enough to support it, and it's just too many points in one thing. If you look through all the games in this tournament, my Trolls, apart from the one Warriors of Chaos where they killed the Knights and then the monster, they really underperformed. And this is 630 points. Where would I put these points otherwise? I mean, in the same situation, let's say I took a second unit of black works, right? That I would still have 130 points to play with, which could have gone into throwaway units and things, and I think it would have been a lot more reliable and working a lot better for me. I mean, I don't need to worry about the stupidity and stuff. It's just, I mean, obviously when it got to the bigger size games, I still really like them, but I think whenever it's the lower size, they're not going to be showing their face anymore. And if I can't find some way to get those throwaway units in, they're not going to show their face anymore. Then we get on to my war machines, and I was very impressed with my war machines. Both the Doom Diver and the Rock Lava, did fantastic things for me, really helping me in the games that they were there. And I'm really thinking that I'm going to start bringing them back into my list. That's something I was already kind of thinking of anyway, because with things like the Blood Crushers coming out, we really need to get that kind of long range punch in to try and deal with this toughness 5 1+ save type things before they get to combat and really hurt you. And so I'm actually really thinking that in my list going forward, I'm going to start going to bring these back in. I really don't know what type of ratio I'm going to work with, but I'm thinking right now 1 Doom Diver, 1 Rock Lava, 2 Chukkas. And I mean, those Chukkas, I'm not sure. I mean, that might be double Doom Diver, 1 Rock Lava, but we're going to have to play with it and see. But anyway, that's how it was. I feel very well for how I did with the 3 wins, 2 losses, and a tie. I mean, it's more wins than losses, which I'm already going for. And yeah, just a great time overall. So thanks for watching. And if you have any comments on how I did, my army list, or anything else, just throw them down below. And I'm tired from doing 8 videos in a row, so we'll talk to you later. Bye.